Good afternoon to the Executive Summit. It's so wonderful to see all of you here. Today we have Harry S. Campbell. And I found out that the S is important because of the books that he's written. We'll get into that, but without the S, you can see a lot of Harry Campbells. This is the Harry S. Campbell. So we want to make sure we get the right one here today, and we do have it, and this is going to be exciting. I can tell you from the short time I've chatted with him. I'm Duke Worthington. I'll be moderating this conversation, and again, very much looking forward to it, and for all of your questions when we wrap up our conversation. So let's jump right in. Harry has done many things.
Can't hold a job.
I'm going to start out there. I ironically just saw a piece that is by David Epstein, and it's titled Range, and he's just done phenomenal research. You might want to write that one down. And it talks about why generalists triumph in a specialized world, and it talks about those who go wide and have very different areas that they work in, but go deep into it. And from what I've seen and the little bit that I've chatted with Harry, he is the perfect example. In fact, I probably ought to have you connect with this David. He'd probably love to talk with you. So anyway, a little bit for you to look at, but the evidence is showing that what Harry has done is a wonderful way to have a career. And I will get this started by, first of all, skipping the career for a little bit and talk a little bit about you and what you're doing. And he's got 2 books that he's published, and he just told me, I was asking about what the next Get Real book was going to be, but he said he's already got it rolling and ready to come out with his 3rd Get Real. The first one's on leadership, second one on culture, and the 3rd one is going to be on
Get Real Mindset.
Get Real Mindset, a little more of a general of who we are and what we do. So talk about the family real quick. Tell me what's going on. Well, I mentioned the books. How does all this work with your speaking and your books?
Sure. Unfortunately, my wife was diagnosed with a malignant inoperable brain tumor in 2004. The good news is it's a slow growth tumor, not to be confused with the GBMs or glioblastoma, which are very, very aggressive, like what John McCain had.
Yes.
My wife's is slow growth. It's an astrocytoma. The problem is it's enmeshed in her motor cortex. They don't exactly know how long it'll take before bad things happen to her, but they suspected it would be 10 or 12 years. It's now been 14, and so she's doing really remarkably well. She has numbness on her left side, but remarkably well. I got very tired of supporting her with words because they sound hollow. I'm 57. I'm not in any sort of bad health. I think I'm going to live forever, and she's trying to figure out whether tomorrow is the beginning of the end.
Right.
And that's very surreal to try to relate to that. So I decided I needed to provide support and love in a different way. And so in 2011 and 12, I put a PowerPoint together and turned it into a book. So I did it kind of backwards. Most people write a book and turn it into a PowerPoint. I was like, no. I got a PowerPoint on leadership, which really is stories from my career, turned it into a book. The book is really, truly done for legitimacy. If someone wants to hire me, you have a book, you can go to Amazon, you can buy it on Kindle. You have the ability to find out a bit more about me. Have a website, books, and I started speaking, and I decided at the beginning, and I still do this today, is I give 100% of my gross speaking fees to brain cancer research in honor of my wife. And it made me so happy to be able to support her that way that 4 years later I came out with my 2nd book, Get Real Culture. I was a little tired of hearing my own self speak about Get Real Leadership, so I had to have a 2nd one. The 3rd one is in my briefcase right now, and I'm darn near done with it. So by late summer or fall, it'll be out. I'm happy to say that of the speeches that I have booked through the end of the year, I will surpass $400,000 raised from the speaking and the books. And thank you. I love it, and it enables me to give back in a way that really matters to our family, and I love doing it. The organization that I give the money to is actually in Kansas City. They're on downtown 16th and Oak. It's called Head for the Cure. Matt Anthony, who's a dear friend of mine, he was the VML advertising agency. He was the CEO for about 14 or 15 years. He lost his brother to a brain tumor in '03. I was a friend of Matt's. Our family was all in supporting him. We did all that, and then less than a year later, my wife was diagnosed with a brain tumor also. So as I like to say, you can't make this stuff up, but you also can't run from it. You've got to hit this thing head on. I love doing it. I've given speeches to a 9-person Community America book club that met at lunch and paid me $0. And I've flown to Gettysburg and been on stage and spoken to the top 64 executives from the biggest division of Cisco Systems with generals from the military on either side of me, and everything in between. But I absolutely love it. And I'm proud to be able to support my wife that way, but also it's just something I do to get to share my story. So the combo is very cool.
That's powerful, and wish Chris the very best and continue to carry on as things have been. That's wonderful. And,
Thank you.
And the work is amazing. A little bit of the books and things that we go through. We'll have to get copies here.
Oh.
So we'll want to make sure that we do that. Brian, wherever you are, we want to make sure we get copies here. So we've got those for the ACA
That's
members
cool.
to be part of.
I charge $10 each on Amazon because I had to double space them to get them to 100 pages, and so I didn't feel like charging more than $10 made any sense. If I sign them, they're worth 10 and a nickel though. So
Ooh, there we go.
Right
got
here.
the pen ready to go. That's awesome. Harry, thanks. And transitioning from that, we talked a little bit about how close to the family. You guys are getting ready here in a couple of weeks to head on a Baltic cruise, I think.
We are.
That's cool to be able to do things. And I bring that up because a part of what he talks about in culture and things that we chatted is the importance of the relationships, and family is such a big part of that, who we work with. One of the questions that I asked as we were in there chatting a little bit is I asked the question, what's the key to success? And you explained, you said, well, I could take an hour and a half on this, but you really condensed it down and shared about how you treated people. Kind of go into that for me and talk about how that started, how you got started, and maybe even a little bit, I'll throw out a little bit here also, and we can show the words that Sam shared with you. Mm-hmm. But Sam Walton was a mentor of his.
Yes.
So some neat stuff. Go ahead. What's the key? What's the key?
Simplifying a question like that is hard, but I will say, if I need to, I can. I treat people extraordinarily well. And I don't do it because I want to win. I don't do it because other people think I should. I do it because that's the way I'm wound. I grew up in an alcoholic family, and my role was as the moderator and pleaser and the person that kind of knew what was going on. And it was my goal to try to make things okay. My sister did the opposite. She was the roiler, R-O-I-L-E-R. And that continued to carry forward into the business world. And one of the things that I was always wondering about, and I started my career at Procter & Gamble in marketing, was whether I was going to be too conflict averse or too nice to be successful in business. And I really, truly wondered that. I was offered the opportunity to move to Northwest Arkansas as a P&G employee. They moved people from all functions down to work directly with Wal-Mart employees to be able to run the business better instead of just sell through and sell to. Mm-hmm. When I moved down there, Sam kind of took a liking to me. I was fairly young for the rest of the people on the team, and they all had kids, and so they had responsibilities that I didn't have. And so I was always hanging around Walmart headquarters, and so I spent a lot of time with Mr. Sam. I've been to his house a couple of times. And I found something fascinating about him. He's the nicest person that I could possibly imagine. When I was around him, he was the richest man in the world. I think he was worth $18 billion back when that was a lot of money. Okay, that's
a billionaire, billionaire. Yeah,
that's like Jeff Bezos tips that at dinner. But it was extraordinary because he would make hard decisions if need to. If you didn't do your job and you deserved to be fired, he would, of course, fire you. But at the end of the day, he was genuinely a nice person. He listened to me. He remembered who I was. He asked me questions. He cared about me. And I thought, wow, if this guy can do this, it's going to set me free. So he didn't change how I operate with people at all. What he did was he set me free to have the confidence that that I could be me and still have a chance to win. And it's really hard to understand how unlocking that within an individual, and it doesn't matter what is unlocked, really lowers your anxiety and enables you to be you. And I love that about him. We were talking earlier, Duke and I were, on the front of the Get Real Leadership book, it says a practical approach that delivers relationships, respect, and results. That is a quote that came from Sam. He said, you can have it all. You can have all three of those. He said, you don't have to trade off respect for results. You don't have to be mean to people. You don't have to be a hard ass. You don't have to treat people poorly in order to win. You can do all of that and have it, and he was an example of that. So having seen him model that made it so that I loved it, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why I wrote this book and have the stories that I have.
That's fantastic. And you've led into that, and we've chatted a little bit, as your career progressed and you've gone different directions, but one thing continued to happen for you because of the relationships that you built is you were able to bring a lot of people with you, and you said kind of pick the cream of the crop of those. So tell me more, tell us all about how that came about.
Well, the secret sauce is if you treat people well, a lot of them want to work with you. And so when I had an opening on my team, a lot of people would want to apply. And the cool part about it was I realized that gave me an advantage, because then I could pick the best person that was the nicest. I love the combo. A-plus players that are nice. And by the way, you can find them if you're patient. And so they would want to follow me, and then I would cheer them on. I would give them what they need. One of the other things I learned from Sam, he emphasized all the time, was servant leadership. Invert the pyramid. If you're going to be a leader at Wal-Mart, is what he said, is that your job is to make the people that work for you make their job easier, not the opposite. He said if you do the opposite, you won't work here anymore. And I thought, wow, that's kind of wild. Most companies don't operate that way. Your role is to make sure you know what your boss needs, what she wants, how she needs it, and deliver it for her. He turned it upside down, and I thought, wow. I tried to operate that way. I don't talk about servant leadership because, frankly, in the last 20 years, I think it's been overused and misunderstood. But that is what I like to operate with. And that made it so that great people wanted to work for me, and I would turn them loose, and I'd cheer them on, and then they'd make me look good, and I'd be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then all of a sudden, it spirals upward. And I'm a big fan of, I'm a huge sports fan, and one of the things I believe in immensely is momentum. And I'm not talking about momentum necessarily in a 7 to 10 minute period that the Raptors had last night. I'm talking about momentum of an organization. And if you get the right culture going, it feeds on itself, and then the results come, and then it feeds on itself, and better people come, and so all of a sudden you can spiral upward. Same thing can happen downward, and I really pay attention to that because my whole theory is that culture, in the medium and long term, there is no such thing as a company that can win without a strong culture. In the short term, you can win. You can have a patent. You can be first to market. You can have an organization and a culture that people don't like and is toxic, and you can still win, but that will not last. I do not believe it.
Crank it down, right.
You will not. There's no way. I don't see it. I mean, when I talk about companies and culture, the three of the ones that I love to talk about, and I had a lunch discussion just today, are Quick Trip, Southwest Airlines, and Costco. The reason why I mention those three, they're not in any industry that has any sexiness to them at all. One of them's in a convenience store. One of them is basically a concrete slab building with a bunch of stuff in it. And the other one's an airline that used to be known as the cattle car airline. And they all have extraordinarily real, productive, and relatively fun environments that enable the employees to do what they need to do and the team to take care of customers and to win. And I believe that's not by chance. I believe that's done very purposefully by the leaders of those organizations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll pull back in. One of the things you also said was being driven, and you just talked about the long haul. I would think that probably your experience in school as a long-distance runner and in the track field, and also, of course, your studies set you up perfectly for business, didn't they?
Yes. I am an East Asian history major from college. How about that? Economics double major, but East Asian history was what I graduated from. I went to Vanderbilt. You know, every once in a while I like to say, yeah, my parents told me that if you're going to go get a liberal arts degree, make sure you go to a really expensive school. Check that box off, didn't I, huh? East Asian history. But what's fascinating is while I was at Vanderbilt, as I've said, I love sports. And I wanted desperately to be a pro athlete or do something, but I wasn't good enough at the stick and ball games. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't fast enough. But I realized I could run for 5 miles as fast as I could for 100 meters. And the cool thing about long distance running to me was it enabled me to be in a sport, but it also had one thing. You got to have some talent, but at the end of the day, the main thing that matters is grit and not quitting. And that's the story of my life. I just keep going. I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I'm not better than anybody in this room in almost anything, but the problem is you'll lose to me because 4 days from now, you're going to be like, I got to go home, and I'll be like, I win. You left, I win. And so I became a long distance runner, and what was cool about it is I really stuck to my principles of training, and I had a good coach and great teammates, and I ended up setting the school record at Vanderbilt for 10,000 meters.
Really?
And it stood for 35 years.
Wow.
I love to be able to say I still had it, and I did until April of 17, and then some young punk, of course he's young, he's in college. He broke my record, and it was amazing that I was able to hold it that long, but it was a testament to the skill set I have, which is tenacity.
Yeah.
And you know, and by the way, I love liberal arts. My father was a theology professor at a liberal arts school. My mom was a Latin and English teacher at a high school, and so they didn't worry about what trade I was getting into. They wanted me to think and learn how to process things and problem solve and communicate. And what's fascinating is I don't really care what industry I work in. I can learn an industry. It's the skill sets that matter to me, and that same thing for people that work with me and they work for me. I want to find people that have skill sets as opposed to worrying about what their specific experiences have been.
That's fantastic. And I've heard that from a few others I've known who have been extremely successful, and when I really pinned them down on what do you think made the difference, they said, I hire people with the right attitude. I'll teach them the rest of the stuff. And I said, really?
No, that's beautiful.
They said, yeah, it's that simple. So I think you, in some way, emphasize that. Now, the tenacity and the grit and those things. Give us a bit of the history real quick, because Procter & Gamble was a big part of the start for you, working with Mr. Walton, and then kind of take us through the evolution of how you've come to today now.
I don't think anybody's going to believe it, but I'll tell you anyway. So I spent 7 years at P&G out of business school, the first 7 years of my career, and part of that I had moved down to Northwest Arkansas, so that was about 2.5 years. By the way, this weekend I'm going to Fayetteville, and it's the 30th reunion of the founding of the Wal-Mart P&G Customer Team, of which I was one of those members. So I'm going down there for a really cool celebration between the two companies, which is fun. I left P&G in 1992 after 7 years and came to Kansas City. Everything since 92 has been here. So someone says, are you from here? I say, no, I'm a Hoosier because I love Indiana, but I've been here 27 years. Eventually, I'm going to start saying, yes, I'm from Kansas City. I don't know when that's going to be. So I came here to work for Sprint. I have had a weird career since then. I've made some decisions, some of which you look at and you go, how'd that work out for you? Not so well. I was at Sprint for 5 years and was a vice president and then quit because I got a chance to be the co-owner of a small business. It happened to be a sports marketing firm, and I'm a freak about sports, 20-person company in Corporate Woods, and we were the Mr. K Award winner in 1998. So we were the Business of the Year in the Kansas City area. And I am proud to say that Danny O'Neill's Roastery was in the final top 10. We beat him. Laser Cycle with Rick Kreska, top 10. We beat him. I love the idea of having won that award because as a small business coming from P&G and Sprint, I'd never had to worry about payroll. I'd never had to worry about fixing my own printer. I'd never had to do any of that. And all of a sudden, I'm thrust into it. And the first time a customer slow paid us and we had to borrow money in order to make payroll, I was not happy. I said, wow, this is a different world. But it was a great experience for me. Then, unfortunately, I decided to sell my half of that in order to get into the internet startup world of 1999. That was back when the NASDAQ was going like this. Pets.com had the sock puppet. It was worth like $1 trillion. They didn't have a business model, but they were worth $1 trillion. I went on house hunting trips and came very close to moving to San Francisco, but instead became the CEO of an employee and then a CEO of an internet startup in the river market of Kansas City. We had hardwood floors, free M&Ms, and dogs in the office, but we didn't do very well. Another really good lesson is what I like to say. My wife has a great statement. She says, it's either a success or a good story. I have a lot of good stories about that period of time in my career. And that was great for me. It was very humiliating. It was humbling, but it was extraordinarily important for me to understand what small business profitability and then an internet startup that basically went out of business was like. I was going to stay in Kansas City, so I ended up going back to Sprint. And I think that 4 or 5 year period between the ages of 35 and 39 in my life gave me a PhD in business. And so when I went back to Sprint, even though I was still at a big company, which I had been with before, I think I was better because of my experiences at the small business and the internet startup, and especially the failure. I ended up getting very, very lucky in becoming a president at Sprint at the age of 41, ran a couple divisions, and then when Embark spun off and Dan Hesse became the CEO of Embark, they spun out of Sprint. I went with him and worked for him for 4 years or so. And so I've had this interesting mixture, and one of the reasons why I love my stories are so different. It could be from a profitable small business, a failed internet startup, a huge Fortune 500 company, or it could be one of my speaking experiences. And the stories that I had to tell about these, sometimes I don't even believe myself.
But the same theme continues through about how you treat people and the
It is.
relationships.
One of the things I first learned was that there's no such thing as difference in culture and leadership in a company that's 30 people versus 30,000. Scale is different, of course. But leadership is leadership across any of those things. And if you don't believe culture is, and you allow culture to happen, what I like to say, whether it's at home or at work, a culture will form. And so I like to be very deliberate about putting a culture in place that's very positive. But it's the same whether it's 20 people or 20,000. Doesn't matter. What you do operationally on a day-to-day basis is very different when you're the CEO of an internet startup than if you're a president of a division of Sprint. Hugely different. But the culture and leadership issues are the same.
Wow. Wow. That's huge. And I was going to ask you, you hit on that a little bit, how you go about that as the leader of both of those. There's a lot of different dynamics, but the culture itself, it has to be the same.
It is. I love to be very dramatic when I take over a business. And almost all the businesses I've taken over say customer first somewhere. It's written down or something. And I'm like, I say not only no, but hell no. No, no, no.
Now say that
first
again.
Is the team.
Okay. That's
not the customers.
Okay.
The team is first. And the employees are first. I want to get the right people in the right jobs with the right resources because they are the ones that take care of the customers, not me. And so I'm a bit overly dramatic. Maybe it's 1A, 1B, but I don't say that. I say it is not. I show up at Dury, they said patients first. I said no, no, no. It is not. It is the team, because if you're going to run a business, you have to have a strong team. You want tenure if you can. You don't want to always be hiring and training. You can be much more successful. And little things matter. And I'm going to illustrate why I believe this. 6 months before I left, one of our patients at Dury was berating one of my med techs. And she's the person that takes the pictures and readies a patient for the doctor. Just berating him. And I was getting ready to intervene, and one of our surgeons came up and said, "What's going on?" and was trying to explain, trying to understand it. Well, my employee and the customer was there, and the customer was just being nasty. And my surgeon said, "I just want you to understand, 4 miles from where you're standing, there are 6 different people that will do LASIK, and I would welcome you to go to any of those right now because you're not doing us right here." I said, wow, that employee, by the way, will remember that the rest of their lives. It was extraordinary because what that does is that puts into play the idea of team first. By the way, read the Southwest Airlines book sometime about Barrett, whatever. She does the same thing. She said it is team first. It doesn't. Customers are the ones that deliver the revenue, but you can't get customers that are loyal, that deliver the revenue, unless you have a team that does that. So you go team first, customers, results, and it's a feedback loop. And I love that statement. I love it, love it, love it.
I'm looking at a little bit with the time that we have left, and I'm not sure whether to expand on that or we wrap it up with that. Is such a powerful cycle that you talk about, where you work with the team, create that culture, it creates the revenues through the customers, and back it goes. Is any part of that you would like to expand on, just for the wrap up for those who are here and for those that will be watching this in the future?
I'll go a little bit deeper on the culture piece. I've always known that one of the things that I do well is create this kind of culture, because I am an extraordinarily optimistic and joyful person. Frankly, it's because I had a rough first 20 years, and I'm okay. And so my theory is, get some blessings and be joyful. To be able to create that is fun for me, and one of my brand attributes is I'm very mischievous. So no matter what the situation I'm in, I'm thinking funny thoughts. Now, that's not always good, by the way, and I don't always filter, but what I try to do is be true to myself, and the reason why these books are called Get Real is the going away party. So when I left Sprint to spin off to Embark, my team, they were across the country. We had about 3,500 people. Most of them were in call centers. And they gave me a surprise going away party, and they gave me a bunch of notes, and my wife said, "Everybody's saying you're very real. What does that mean?" I said, "I don't really know how to explain it, but what I can do is tell you what it's not. It's not being a stuffy executive that thinks they're better than anybody else." This is what Sam Walton would say. Sam didn't drive an old pickup truck because he wanted people to think that he was humble. He drove an old pickup truck because that's the way he is. He treated me well and listened to me because that's the way he is. And that's the way I operate. And the fun part about it is that leads to good things, which lead to better results, which leads to better people wanting to work with me, which leads to better results. And I just sit here and go, wow, I feel extraordinarily blessed by that cycle upward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Harry S. Campbell, that's wonderful. We can all take so many things away from that. Thank you all.
Thanks.